They say the towns of the American West died of thirst, for gold, for water, for hope. But some towns didn't just die. They were murdered, leaving behind not just empty buildings, but a stain on the land itself, a chilling energy that whispers a single, terrifying word: don't. In the high desert of California, there is a place so perfectly preserved in its own decay, it feels like it expired only yesterday. This is Bodie, a town whose last residents were not people, but the ghosts of their own violent sins, and a curse so potent, the evidence of its power still arrives in the mail every single week. This isn't just a story of a town that went bust. It's a story of a place that actively punishes those who disturb its slumber. The West was built on a fever dream. Men and women chased rumors of gold and silver into desolate canyons and unforgiving mountains, erecting entire cities overnight. For a fleeting moment, places like Bodie were the heart of the American dream, a sea of sin teeming with 10,000 souls, 65 saloons, and a reputation for a killing almost every day. It was a place where fortunes were made at the end of a pickaxe and lives were lost at the pull of a trigger. But the gold vein, like a beating heart, eventually slowed and then stopped. The people vanished. What's unsettling about Bodie is not that they left, but how they left. It was a mass exodus driven by something more than just economic collapse. It was a flight. Settings remained on dining room tables, merchandise sat on store shelves, and small personal treasures were left behind as if their owners intended to return in the morning. They never did. Today, Bodie exists in a state of arrested decay, maintained by the California State Parks system exactly as it was found. But to walk its silent streets is to feel watched. You are a trespasser in a place that has long forgotten the living. And this is where the legend takes a deeply unsettling turn. It's known as the Bodie Curse. The lore is simple and absolute. Anyone who takes anything from the town, no matter how small, a rusted nail, a sliver of wood, a shard of colored glass, will be hounded by relentless misfortune. Sickness, financial ruin, freak accidents, and crippling depression are said to plague the thief until the stolen object is returned. This could be dismissed as folklore, a tale spun to deter souvenir hunters. But then there are the letters. They arrive at the park ranger's office constantly from all over the world. Packages containing dusty rocks and bent spoons accompanied by desperate handwritten notes begging for forgiveness. They are letters of confession detailing lives that have fallen apart, all traced back to the moment they took a piece of Bodie. One letter spoke of a man who picked up an old mining spike, only to suffer 3 major car accidents and a house fire within a year. Another, from a woman who took a small bottle, detailed a sudden, inexplicable spiral of disease that doctors couldn't diagnose. They all return the items, hoping to appease whatever unseen guardian protects this desolate ground. But what is this force? Is it the collective anger of the thousands buried in the town's cemetery? Or is it something older, a presence awakened by the bloodshed and greed that soaked into the very soil? The curse on those who steal from Bodie is a chilling warning, a testament to a lingering power. But it is only the beginning of the mystery, because the real horror is not found in the items people take away, but in the stories of those who were forced to stay behind. The returned objects sent to Bodie are physical proof of a lingering power, but the town's darkest secrets aren't carried away in pockets. They remain, trapped in the dust and shadows. The most chilling of these is a story that begins with a child's laughter and ends with the sound of a falling pickaxe. They call her the Angel of Bodie, But to encounter her is to understand that some angels are not harbingers of heaven, but eternal residents of a hell on earth. Her grave sits in the windswept Bodie Cemetery, a small, lonely stone marked with a tragic story. She was just 3 years old, the daughter of a miner, a tiny flicker of innocence in a town consumed by greed and violence. Her death, the stories say, was a brutal accident. A miner, enraged by a dispute, swung his pickaxe wildly, and the little girl was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her life was extinguished in an instant, an accidental sacrifice on the altar of gold. Her death marked a turning point for Bodie. It was as if the town's black heart had finally consumed the last of its light. Soon after, the mines began to fail, the people began to leave, and the silence began its reign. But the little girl never left. For over a century, visitors and park rangers have reported seeing her, a small figure in a white dress standing by the window of the James Cain house, watching the empty streets. The faint sound of a child's giggle carried on the wind near the Methodist church where her funeral was held. Tourists taking photographs of the cemetery have been stunned to later find the faint, translucent image of a small child standing behind them, an uninvited guest in their holiday snapshot. Her presence is most powerful near her grave. People speak of an overwhelming wave of sadness washing over them, a grief so profound it brings them to their knees. Others have felt a gentle tug on their sleeve, like a small hand seeking comfort, only to turn and find no one there. She is known as the Angel of Bodie, a lonely spirit forever searching for the parents who left her behind. But is she a benevolent spirit or something more? Some paranormal investigators believe her energy is intrinsically linked to the curse. They suggest that it is her childlike rage, her eternal sorrow, that lashes out at anyone who desecrates her home, attaching her pain to the stolen objects. She is the guardian of Bodie's tragic memory, a ghost whose sadness is so powerful it has become a weapon. But the story doesn't end with a lonely child. There is another presence in Bodie, one that stalks the grounds near the old Standard Mine. It is a darker, heavier energy, thick with the stench of whiskey, sweat, and regret. Locals believe it is the spirit of the miner who killed her, a soul so tormented by his guilt that he, too, is chained to this ghost town. His presence isn't mournful, it's angry. Visitors who wander too close to the rusting machinery of the stamp mill, the site of the girl's death, report feeling a sudden, suffocating dread. They hear the phantom sound of heavy boots crunching on gravel behind them and feel the prickling sensation of being watched by unseen, malevolent eyes. The Angel of Bodie may be the town's most famous ghost, but the tormented spirit of her killer is its most dangerous. He is a ghost not of sorrow, but of unending rage, a rage that has festered for over 100 years, waiting for a new target. A single angry spirit is a terrifying prospect, but what happens when the killer isn't a person, but the place itself? What happens when a town is built in a location so remote, so utterly cut off from the world that the madness of its people has nowhere to go but inward, infecting the very timbers of the buildings? Deep in the Alaskan wilderness, clinging to the side of a mountain and bleeding rust onto a glacier, stands the impossible town of Kennecott. It is a place that wasn't just abandoned by its people. It was a place that psychologically devoured them first, and its ghosts are not of tragedy, but of pure, claustrophobic insanity. Kennecott wasn't a town born of hope, but of a calculated, brutal ambition. In 1900, prospectors discovered a vein of copper ore so pure it was practically green gold. The problem? It was located in the heart of the Wrangell Mountains, one of the most hostile and inaccessible landscapes on Earth. To get the copper out, the billionaire Guggenheim family funded a miracle of engineering and a monument to human suffering, a 196-mile railway built over treacherous glaciers and through frozen canyons. The men who built it, and later the miners who worked the ore, were essentially prisoners in a vertical city of red-painted buildings. They were trapped by mountains, ice, and the endless, oppressive darkness of the Alaskan winter. For 27 years, Kennecott was a money-making machine, pulling nearly $200 million of copper from the earth. But the price was paid in sanity. The isolation was absolute. Cabin fever wasn't just a phrase here, it was a lethal diagnosis. Journals from the era speak of a pervasive paranoia, a creeping dread that turned friends into enemies. Men would stare at the white, unchanging landscape for so long they would simply snap. Stories abound of miners who, without a word, would walk out of the bunkhouse and into a blizzard, never to be seen again, their bodies swallowed by the glacier. Others succumbed to violent outbursts in the suffocating confines of the mines, their disputes settled with dynamite and drilling equipment. The town had a hospital, but it treated as many broken minds as it did broken bones. This psychological poison seeped into the ground, and today, Kennecott is considered one of Alaska's most haunted locations. The 14-story concentration mill, a skeletal red giant dominating the valley, is the epicenter of the activity. Visitors and caretakers report hearing the deafening phantom roar of machinery that has been silent for nearly a century. They see shadowy figures flitting across catwalks hundreds of feet in the air and hear disembodied screams echoing from the dark, ore-stained chutes where so many men were maimed or killed. The ghosts of Kennecott are not gentle souls. They are the tormented echoes of men driven mad by greed and isolation. But even the documented history of psychosis and violence cannot fully account for the sheer malevolence felt in the town's darkest corners. It cannot explain the strange symbols found carved into the mine shafts or the persistent local legends of something else that lived in the mountains. A foreman's journal, discovered decades after the town was abandoned, speaks not of men losing their minds, but of something they uncovered deep within the earth, something ancient and aware that began to whisper to them from the darkness when they dug too deep. The ghost of a man is an echo of a life lived. But the entity the Kennecott miners disturbed was never human. It was an ancient consciousness born of rock and ice, and it did not whisper of regret. It whispered of hunger. Long before the first prospectors scaled the mountainside, the native Athna people knew this place was sacred, and they knew it was dangerous. They spoke of the Wrangell Mountains as a place of immense spiritual power, home to elemental beings that were best left undisturbed. To them, the act of industrial mining, blasting through rock with dynamite, scarring the sacred landscape, and piercing the heart of the mountain, was the ultimate act of desecration. They warned that the mountain would not tolerate the intrusion. The miners, blinded by their fever for copper, did not listen. The foreman's journal spoke of whispers from the darkness. Modern psychology calls it auditory hallucination, a symptom of extreme isolation and stress. But the Ahtna shamans had a different explanation. They believed the miners had awakened the mountain's spirit, a powerful and territorial force that viewed the men and their machines as a violent infection. The constant thundering roar of the stamp mill, the shock waves of dynamite, the ceaseless grinding of metal on rock, it was an agony inflicted upon a living entity. And that entity began to fight back. The madness that swept through Kennecott, they believed, was not cabin fever. It was a targeted psychological warfare waged by the spirit of the land itself. The whispers the miners heard were the mountains seeping into their minds, preying on their fears, amplifying their paranoia, and turning them against one another. It fed on their greed and despair, growing stronger with every act of violence and every soul lost to the encroaching insanity. This wasn't just a passive presence. Local folklore speaks of a creature, a thing of the ice, that was the physical manifestation of the mountain's rage. It was said to stalk the mine tunnels, a being of shadow and cold that could mimic sounds and drive men mad with a single glance. Are these just stories? Perhaps. But how does one explain the strange, non-geometric symbols found carved deep within the abandoned shafts? They don't match any known language or mining notation. Some investigators believe they were desperate wards, etched into the rock by terrified men trying to protect themselves from something they could not see. Others suggest a more terrifying possibility, that the symbols were carved by men whose minds had already been broken, becoming instruments of the very entity that was destroying them. The unexplained accidents, the disappearances into blizzards, the sudden murderous rages, were they truly just the tragic results of a harsh environment? Or were they sacrifices demanded by an ancient power that had been violently awakened? The copper is gone and the mines have been silent for decades, but the entity the miners unleashed remains. It is patient. It is watchful. Modern paranormal investigators, armed with sensitive recording equipment, have ventured into the collapsing tunnels of the Bonanza mine. They go seeking the ghosts of miners, but the evidence they bring back suggests something else is waiting in the deep. On their audio recordings, amidst the wind and the dripping water, they have captured electronic voice phenomena unlike any other. It is not the sound of a human voice. It is a low, guttural breathing, a chilling, resonant growl from the very throat of the mountain. And on the clearest recordings, it seems to be speaking a single, guttural word that sounds disturbingly like, "Get out." A disembodied voice on a digital recorder is chilling, but it is distant. It's a ghost in the machine, easy to dismiss as static or suggestion. It is much harder to dismiss when the creature that made the sound is standing in the darkness right in front of you. In the summer of 2003, 2 urban explorers ventured into the deepest levels of Kennecott's Bonanza mine, looking to capture images of a forgotten world. Only one of them came out with his mind intact. Their story serves as the most terrifying modern testament to the fact that the mountain is still awake. They pushed deeper than the tourist paths, past the warning signs and collapsing timbers, drawn by the allure of the unknown. For the first hour, it was an adventure, but as the last glimmer of daylight vanished behind them, the atmosphere changed. The silence became a physical pressure, and the air grew unnaturally cold, clinging to them like a frozen shroud. They found the strange symbols from the legends carved into a wall slick with black moisture. One of the explorers, a man named Ben, felt a growing sense of dread, the primal instinct to turn back. His partner, however, was mesmerized, convinced they were on the verge of a historic discovery. It was he who first heard the whispers, dismissing them as his own ears playing tricks on him in the profound silence. Then, their high-powered flashlights began to flicker in unison. In the strobing, disorienting darkness, they heard it, the same low, guttural sound from the paranormal recordings. But it wasn't coming from a speaker. It was echoing from the tunnel just ahead of them, a wet, gravelly sound that felt impossibly ancient. Panic set him. They turned to flee, but in the chaos, they were separated. Ben frantically called out his partner's name, his voice swallowed by the oppressive dark. The only reply was a single, blood-curdling scream that seemed to be ripped from his friend's throat. Ben eventually found him, huddled in a dead-end passage. His friend's flashlight was aimed at a solid wall of rock, its beam shaking violently. His face was a mask of utter, soul-shattering terror, his eyes wide and fixed on something Ben couldn't see. He was whispering the same 2 words over and over again. "It has no eyes. It has no eyes." Ben had to physically drag his catatonic friend through the miles of suffocating darkness and back into the Alaskan sunlight. His partner was never the same. He was institutionalized with a complete psychotic breakdown, unable to form a coherent sentence. He never spoke of what he saw in that tunnel, except for one cryptic, horrifying phrase that he would repeat to doctors during his moments of brief lucidity. "It wears the rock." What did he mean? What did he see in that moment his mind shattered? A creature made of stone? A spirit that could camouflage itself as the very walls of the mine? His terrifying encounter confirms the worst fears from the foreman's journal and gives terrifying context to the Athena legends. The entity is real, it is intelligent, and it is still guarding its domain. From the vengeful child spirit of Bodie to the mind-breaking consciousness in Kennecott, these abandoned towns are more than just historical footnotes. They are wounds on the landscape that have never healed. And it forces us to ask a final, terrifying question. What if these places aren't just haunted by their past? What if they are active, predatory locations where the veil between our world and another is gone, and the things that drove the first people away are simply waiting for us to return? We search for a veil between worlds, a gateway to explain the horrors that linger in these forgotten towns. But the most terrifying truth may be that there is no veil to tear. These places are not bridges to some other dimension. They are mirrors, reflecting a darkness that was born right here, in our own world. A darkness forged from human emotions so extreme, so violent, so greedy, so filled with despair, that it became a permanent feature of the landscape, a psychic scar that will never fade. There's a theory, one whispered among paranormal researchers and physicists alike. It suggests that rock, wood, and water can act like a recording device, absorbing the energy of intense events and replaying them for eternity. This is not about souls trapped between heaven and hell. It's about memory, imprinted onto the very atoms of a place. When you walk the streets of Bodie, the sadness you feel for the little girl in the cemetery is not just your own empathy. You are feeling the raw, unfiltered echo of a mother's grief and a town's shame, an emotional residue that has saturated the ground for over a century. The menacing presence of the miner is the psychic stain of a violent, guilt-ridden mind forever playing out its rage. The Bodie Curse isn't the work of a guardian spirit, it's a psychic allergic reaction. The land itself, saturated with this negative energy, violently rejects anyone who tries to carry a piece of its trauma away. The town isn't haunted by the dead. It is a place made of pure, crystallized memory. Kennecott is what happens when this phenomenon is taken to its terrifying extreme. For 27 years, the mountain was subjected to a relentless assault, not just of dynamite, but of concentrated human misery, paranoia, and greed. That psychic energy didn't just leave a recording, it coalesced. It achieved a kind of critical mass, birthing a rudimentary, hostile consciousness from the pain inflicted upon it. The entity in the mines, the thing that wears the rock and shattered a man's mind, was not some ancient demon awakened from its slumber. It was something new, something the miners created. It is a genius loci, a spirit of place, born from the collective insanity of the men who bled it for its wealth. They went looking for copper and instead forged a monster from their own avarice. This is the ultimate legacy of these abandoned towns. They are a warning. They prove that the most terrifying forces in the universe are not ghosts or demons, but the untamed emotions within the human heart. greed, violence, and despair are not abstract concepts. They are tangible energies that can poison the earth, giving a terrible and lasting life to our worst impulses. The American West is covered in these scars, monuments not to the fortunes we built, but to the horrors we unleashed in the process. We journey to these places to hunt for ghosts, to feel a chill of the unknown, never realizing that we are simply staring at our own reflection in a dusty mirror. The final, haunting question is not whether these places hold spirits of the dead, but how many new ones we are building right now.